So, Andrew, in today's session, we're going to talk about setting up a strategy for global data protection compliance. That's quite a mouthful. So, can I rephrase it as saying, how do we make our data secure and go globally compliant? Or is can that be another way of putting the subject?
Yes, I just help you understand that that's probably my first slide. So the way that you interpreted is pretty much on point. So it's just helping companies to set up their compliance program. I'm not going to very specific any specific law or any specific standard. Just in general, when a company setting up their means and ways to comply with laws and regulations and all of that, what the best way is it is to for them to take so that they can make their program wide enough, but also at the same time comprehensive and not boring. So typically, that's a paraphrase version of that.
All right. And typically, when you come across data protection, that global data protection and compliance, it seems to be very complicated. It seems to be very difficult to achieve. Is it really so?
To be very honest, most of them revolve around some certain basic principles, or in human terms, it's called morals. So, in terms of this compliance, it's just around principles. It's not really complex, but people find it to be complex because they see it as a part of a certain division within the company and not something that they are very interested in. But if everybody tries to understand at least the basic keywords, like how we know keywords like tax, budget, and similar things along the finance realm, if there are some certain keywords that everybody can be aware of in the compliance domain, so that it's not really complex to understand, and it's pretty easy for any layman to understand that. But being in a software industry ourselves, it's of paramount importance because we are developing products and we are offering a lot of services. So it's paramount that our compliance, almost everybody in the organization are aware of these basic security, privacy related terms, so that they're able to understand what their customer wants, because not every customer would be like very specific in their requirements. They'll be, okay, this is what I'm going to do, what should I do? They'll be just coming out of the box and just asking us what should we do. So if a support person does not know how to answer that, then that's going to be a problem. So almost everybody in the organization that they're working in should be aware of these basic things. It's not too complex. I'll try to keep my presentation as easily understandable as possible so that everybody can understand these keywords especially, and that's my ultimate target.
All right. So I will not keep you away from your target. Please begin. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let's get started. I'm so excited to deliver this, being able to have the opportunity to present it to a larger audience in this setup. Uh, Thank you, Shankar, for hosting this. That's a very helpful thing that you've done in order to make our thought leadership as something that's very important. So I'll try to do justice to the time of everyone who's attending. So without wasting further time, I'm just going to start with my presentation. So, like Shankar had said, the topic by itself, if you had read it carefully, it's a very long term. It's about 10 letters or 10 words. Setting up a strategy for global data protection compliance. That's too much of a word. That's too much of a sentence. Too much to grasp for a normal person. So I'm just going to help you break it down a bit. So I'm just splitting up into 4 keywords that everybody can read or understand, so that they can know what is in store for them throughout the next 40-45 minutes of the session. Strategy. That is the first keyword from our title, setting up a strategy. So what is strategy? Strategy is something, it's a plan. It's a plan that helps you to achieve an intended purpose. That's the pretty keyword that is there. So what we're going to talk today is about a plan. So what is going to be our roadmap, or what is our destination, and what is the route that we're going to take in order to reach our destination? Second is global. That is the keyword there in this presentation, because I'm not going to talk about any particular law or any particular topic or any particular standard or regulation. Rather, I'm going to focus more upon how a company can set up its compliance program at a global level, but also making sure that they comply with the local regulations, local implementations of those regulations. So I'm not going to bore you with a lot of these law-specific keywords or standard-specific keywords, but into the aspects that a company can really attempt in order to make it framework that is easily buildable and not something that is very difficult in order to duplicate. For example, if they're complying with something else. So second one is global. We'll understand why that keyword is important as we progress through the slides. So the third keyword is data protection. That's pretty straightforward. It's protecting data. So what is data? It could be any data: financial data, health data, personal data, or even a company's corporate data, also called as confidential data. So it's protecting data. So I'm not going to, even though I'm working for the privacy team, I'm not going to go into the specifics of privacy. I'm just going to go into a general sense of compliance, protecting any type of data. So that is the way that I've chosen to present this, because last week it was about the security and privacy challenges in the cloud. It's a very great presentation. So I just wanted to complement that. And finally, it is compliance. So compliance means to comply, or rather to let yourself in a way to obey certain rules, terms, conditions, laws, standards. So it's basically obedience, or subjecting ourselves to some level of authority. So that is compliance. So these are the four keywords that are important from my topic. So the next heading that I wanted to highlight is why now? Why am I talking about this now? Or why you as an attendee, as a listener, have to go through this particular thing right now? It's because there are a lot of data breaches and penalties that are coming up. So recently you would have seen in the news about the British Airways being fined about 20 million pounds for an incident that happened a year and a half ago. And there's another one from Equifax that happened last year. They paid about $575 million as part of their settlement. So these amounts are really huge. So if you look at the reason why it actually happened, it was because of some very, very small bugs, either in their process, or either in their software, or either in their support, or something like that. So this is one reason that it is important that we understand why this setting up a global program is important, because if we just do justice to one country and we leave off the other, that's going to have its own problem. So the second is the increasing number of legislations. Last week, I was reading an article about the latest compliances that had come up, and China came up with a draft data protection bill. I was really stunned, because China is generally known for governmental intrusions, and that's their way, that's their culture, that's how it has been so far. But when they themselves are coming up with a law that is protecting the privacy of its citizens, I was taken aback. So there's this increasing number of legislations that are coming up. So the next two other things that I want to highlight on why it is important to set up a global program is because there is an increasing number of contractual requirement. Contractual requirements means the contracts that your customers sign with you, or you sign with your vendors, or any business agreement that you sign is a contract. So there are more contractual requirements. They are asking us to comply with certain standards. For example, if you want to go into the government space, then they have their own set of regulations and rules that an organization should comply in order to set up, to gain their business. So there are these increasing number of contractual requirements that every company has to comply with new customers that are signing up with them. So it is very difficult if we have a program that is very narrow, but is not scaling up easily. So that is another reason why it's important. And finally, it gives us more opportunity to grab the markets that we've never been in the past, different domains. For example, if a company is fully into healthcare, maybe they can experiment or try to grab the market in a very similar space, into probably medical devices, not just into just healthcare, but into devices, and then slowly progress onto some other market that they're finding their customers to be in. So these are the four important key points on why it is important to set up a program that is global and that is not very local by itself. And what are the advantages? Like, how does setting up this program help an organization? So right now we saw why is it important, or the important consideration factors. The next is, what are the advantages? What are the things that an organization can gain or have an advantage over because of setting up a global program? Less utilization of resources and time. That is the most important thing, because everybody is being paid for their work. So we want to make the best use, especially during this COVID times. There is so much of layoffs and all of that. So it is very vital to have a program that is scalable despite all of these things, which is resilient to all of these natural financial economic crises. In other words, in summary, it is just an efficient way of doing the work. So it gives us a lot of edge in the way that we handle our programs. And the next is, it gives us a lot of visibility into the markets that we're in, into the data that we handle, to know where our organization is currently in, where we are lacking, and where we need to go. It gives us a lot of visibility into those, and it gives us better control. Like, we can be sure of these are the things that I'm good at, these are the things that my organization is not good at, or areas that we have to improve. So it gives us a good governance. The keyword there is governance. Governance means just like how it is in the government, having a control over, or being able to have some authority over. So it gives us better control and visibility into our processes, into our activities, into our customers, into the data processing, and all of that. And finally, it gives us the advantage that our program, our policies, things that we have, our culture, everything is more standardized and structured, and not something that is ad hoc or something that is developed on the go as and when they require. So, for example, if a rule or a protocol that has been developed for complying with one regulation, if it is scaled up to a global thing, then if your organization has to comply with some other regulation, they can just reuse that. They don't have to rewrite or redo that entire thing. So it gives us a good framework, a good balance, a good baseline where we can just constantly keep building, just improving the small changes that come up with the new and ever changing globe of data protection, the world of data protection. So I have a poll right here. It's a very outright, straightforward poll. So I'd ask you to quickly give in your answers. So the question is, does it fit? So what fits? Find it for yourself. Please give in your response to this. Does one size of program fit all organizations? I'm just going to wait for 10 seconds. Perfect. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward, right? I see from the way that we've responded that it is not the right answer. I mean, yes is not the right answer. The right answer is no. One particular size of a program does not fit all organizations. Every organization is different. For example, if you're getting yourself a dress, then it depends on your height, your weight, your age, all of those factors. Similarly, in an organization, the number of employees they have, their cultural background, their other factors. There are so many factors which we're going to discuss later on through these slides. So the final answer for this is, it's straight and it's outright that no, one size does not fit all. It depends on every organization. So your question might be, knowing that it's not going to fit, what is that we need to do, or what are the things my organization should consider to get a program that is scalable? Right now my organization is small, but we are expanding into multiple markets. What should I do? So I assure you that you're going to find your answers there in today's presentation. Are these your questions? How to do it? What's the budget? How many resources? What's the timeline? Who should do it? Where should I start? You might be facing these questions right now. You might be wondering, okay, is it worth my time in this presentation? Stay tuned. You'll find the answers to all of these.
Okay,
So
Andrew,
I hope you're all
can
ready.
you little close to your mic, please. Little close to your mic.
Sure, Shankar. Thank you.
Thanks.
So I hope you're all ready to start.
Yes, please.
Perfect. So what is step one? Any guesses? I don't think so. So the step one is relax, chill. That's something that we don't do a lot of times. For example, when we hear of a new compliance that's coming, or you're having tight targets, one thing that we start doing is fretting. We get so worried, we get so nervous, we don't have a good sleep at the nights. I've had that initially during the GDPR implementation project of our company. We just get so overdone with our work, or we many things just surpass our mind. So the first thing to do is to just relax. So even now, as you are listening, just sit back on your seats, just relax, and just follow as we progress. So the methodology that I've adopted to share my presentation, or to teach on these particular aspects of setting up this program, it's a very time proven methodology so of project management, which is plan, do, check, and act. So I'm just going to split up my presentation into 4 parts. So the first is planning, then the execution part, and then it's the evaluation part, and then it's going to the response, feedback, and improvement portions. I might not be able to cover all of those today, so most probably it will be split up into 2 portions. So today I'm going to focus more on the planning part, because that is the most important part of setting up the program. So how to navigate through the compliance Cs without a Cs? I know that's a very complex statement. It's a compliance Cs. There is so many things that we have to do, but we should not stop. So what is the key to doing that? The answer lies in the sound itself. It's a homophone. I'm just triggering your intuition, just your curiosity. Okay, what is this guy trying to say? Stay tuned. The step 2 that I mentioned after the step 1 of relaxing is the PDCA, which is the plan phase. As a good compliance pirate, you need to travel the 7 C's. So, if you want to comply, if you want to travel through the compliance C's without a C's, then you have to travel the C's. Okay, that's a word pun. Okay, so I'm just going to, what are those 7 C's? The first one is company. So that's this beautiful quote by William Marion Branham that says, "Show me a company, I'll tell you who you are." Probably he was just talking about your friendships, but I think it's more relevant to your organization as well, isn't it? Show me your company. Like anybody can identify which corporate you're from, or what type of an attribute you'll be having if you're working for certain companies. That's typical. So that's exactly what I understand from the way he's saying it. Show me your company, show me your organization, and I'll tell you who you are. So know your company. There are just 4 highlight points that I want you to think about or consider when you're setting up your data protection compliance program. The first one is vision. The mission statement is something that is present while setting up a company. So by vision, I mean, what is that my organization is heading to? What is that they want to achieve? This is generally dictated by the management on where do we want the company to head? What are the things that we want the company to achieve through its phase? It's the final end outcome of what they want. So in terms of navigation, since we are talking about navigating through the compliance Cs, there's this concept called heading. Even when you're flying, the pilot does this very thing. He sets up a heading for the aircraft, like which side am I going to go? Is it going to be 360 degrees or 150 degrees? He sets up its course. So vision is that course setting factor, the heading that your organization is moving towards. So the second is USP. USP means unique selling points. So unique selling points is, what does your organization want to project as something that's very unique, or what is that one thing that your organization wants to do so that they can be that unique player in the market. What is that edge that they want to have? That is the unique selling points. So for example, at Zoho, we have privacy itself as our unique selling points. If you had been following the news about Zoho, you'd probably be knowing that our chief evangelist, Raju Vejesna, has been on the news quoting a lot of points about Zoho privacy, on how it is helping organizations and how it is different about adjunct surveillance, and why it is important to give the right to privacy back to the people. So that is our unique selling point. That is something that we want to achieve. That is something that we want to project in the market. That is our unique selling point. So what is that your organization wants to project, or what is that one thing that they want to be that market differentiator? So the third one is culture. That is one of the most intangible assets of a company. Like I mentioned initially when me and Shankar were discussing, the one thing that I love about Zoho is the culture. Every every corporate has a culture. That is something that is very unique to them. The way that they grow, that has been one thing I love at Zoho. Again, just reiterating that point, because it helps us to come to an organic growth where it is not just rules and regulations and all these processes and procedures, making things boring for people, but it's about the way that we all grow together in order to achieve our ultimate destination. So whatever it might be, it could be the focal points, the policies, the hierarchy. Zoho is about, like we say, it's a flat hierarchy. Some companies have a very vertical hierarchy. There's a different cultures that different companies are from. So it's important you consider the culture of your company, because that is going to be one of the most influencing part of setting up this program. Because the ultimate aim of a compliance program, I'm going to repeat this statement many times throughout this presentation. The ultimate aim of a compliance program is to be able to help the business to make more business or to stay in the market. That is the ultimate aim of your program, of your compliance program. It should never distress the business, never tax the business too much that a company is not able to grow because of your program. It should be very, very important. And finally, it's the business performance. To be very honest, I initially thought when I was working towards GDPR compliance, is it really important to think about business? I was actually confused. Does that even matter? Like some of the people that I was working with were telling, okay, this is where our customers are from, this is what we're heading, and all of that. I was wondering, why should I know as a compliance person? Why should I really know about this factor? Probably you might also be wondering, like, why is business performance important to setting up a compliance program? And I'll tell you why. It is because unless you know how your business is performing, how your organization is performing, which are the markets that you're having more advantages in, what are the sources of the people who are purchasing your products and services, whether you're into a good profit or you're going to a loss, then you will not be able to set up your program in order to be adaptable to the changing business performance. For example, sometimes there will be a very good profit, sometimes there will be very minimal margin. In all such cases, we cannot afford to have the very strictest level of compliance program, or we cannot afford to have everything, getting the highest levels of compliance in everything. So it's very important to understand that. So these are the 4 factors that we should consider for the first C, which is company. So as part of this exercise, when you do this exercise, this is what you'll probably be learning, which is the business impact assessment. So how important is my business? What are the important things that my business is into? What are the important assets of my business? What are the activities that my business performs? You will have a record of all of that, which is something we call in Zoho as the activity register. So list of 10 things, a list of 20 things that HR department does, list of 20 things that a sales department does. All of these things is what you will be concluding as part of the first step, which is to knowing your company. So the next C that we are going to travel is customers. Revolve your world around the customer, and more customers will revolve around you. That's a very apt quote, because customers are the fuel to our business. They are the ones who keep us driving, who keep us in the market. So it's very important that our compliance program, our business is more tuned towards customer, user centric. So even in terms of personal data and privacy, it's about being user specific, user centric. It's not about data. You have to always revolve around users. That is very important. And what are those factors of consideration that we have, or what are the things we should know from your customers is domains. Where are your customers from? In what domains are they into? By domains, I mean verticals. For example, health, finance, military, governments, small and medium organizations, IT, human resource. These are some of the domains that typically our customers will be from. So depending on where your customers are from, it will really affect the way that you comply with the laws, regulations, and standards. It's very important to know this, where our customers are from, or where do we provide our services to. Second is the needs and expectations. This is a very common term. Like I said, I'll be sharing important keywords that are part of any compliance program. So this is an important keyword: needs and expectations. I'm just going to substantiate that with an example. So, for example, needs. What is need? Need is something that should be there. That's the most basic thing. Like when your customer is signing up for your product, or then you're purchasing, they'll be expecting an SLA commitment with you, which is a service level agreement commitment. For example, having a 99% uptime, having your cloud service running 99% of the time. That is a need. That is something that they must do so that they can do their business. And expectation is something where, for example, they are going through an audit, or they are going through a phase where they need more help from you, or they want to customize the product in such a way to comply with their own requirements. So that is their typical expectation. So it's important to know what are their needs, what are their expectations. And the third is contracts and commitments. Contracts and commitments are the base for any engagement. So for a cloud service, it's going to be, for example, a terms of service, or it's going to be an MSA, master subscription agreement, or for privacy, it's going to be a data protection agreement. There are so many type of agreements. Even if you go to a store and you buy something, there's going to be some warranty, guarantee related terms. In a similar way, so that is your commitment to your customers. Okay, I'm going to do these things for you. If you buy from me, these are the 10 things that you're going to achieve out of that, or these are the 10 things you're going to gain. I'm going to provide you support 24/7. All of those are your commitments, and they ask us to put it through contracts. So heavily, our compliance program is determined through contracts. And the reason why I'm saying that is because, for example, you're heading into a government contract. Let's take the example of India itself. They'll probably ask us to keep the data in our local data centers inside India itself. They'll probably ask us to comply with certain ISO standards, like ISO 9001, which is the quality management standard, ISO 27001, which is the information security management standard. Those would be the basic things in order for us to put a tender for the government, in order to gain their business or something like that. So depending on who your customers are from, I'm drawing comparison to the first point, which is domains. Depending on which domains they are from, banking, finance sector, health sector, there will be these contracts they will sign with you and ask you to comply with the laws and regulations that they are subject to. So contracts are very important, because if your organization does not agree to certain things, you might just lose your business there. So by way of contracts, there will be new additions to your compliance program. So it's always good to be on the lookout for what you are committing to your customers. And finally, it's the responsibilities. Deepa, in her previous presentation last week, would have shared about a topic called a shared responsibility. So what is those things that I, as a service provider, should do, as an organization should do? What are those things that that you as a customer should do? For example, I will take care of the antivirus in my system. I will take care of keeping my service all the time. But you should take care of properly configuring it so that it does not violate your policies. So it's about a shared responsibility model. So knowing your customers, the fourth point there is knowing your responsibilities as an organization. So as a responsible organization, I'm committing to this, and as a responsible organization, I'll take care of this. So knowing your responsibilities. So as part of this exercise,
I got a question here, just to
yes,
clarify.
Shankar.
You mentioned that, in fact, it's very illuminating, because I was expecting that you would say this is more about data being kept secure, but you said emphatically at that you need to keep the customer in the center of the entire exercise, and look around how you can do business with them while still being adhering to the data protection laws. You made a point about domains. So when some company, let's say in a medical field, let us say they are taking care of patients, so does the way you approach GDPR differ from, let us say, someone who is taking care of manufacturing? So is there a difference in the approach you handle the data, or your GDPR compliance systems, when it comes to kinds of customers from various domains, not homogeneous domain, but from heterogeneous domains?
That's a very good question. Actually, it does. But the way that we approach it would be different, because since we are talking about setting up a general program, we are trying to go into the principles. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we always try to go with the principal frameworks instead of going into very specifics of every law.
Right.
So, for example, if you're having customers from a health domain,
Uh-huh.
there's this in the US, there's a law called HIPAA. So we have to comply with that. They have to comply because they are providing healthcare. So they'll ask us to comply with additional requirements. For example, service providers are supposed to sign an agreement called as a BAA, which is a business associate agreement.
Uh-huh.
In that, they'll ask us to comply with certain regulations. So in that way, when they're coming from different sectors, our approach would not majorly differ, but there will be this delta or these minor changes in our implementations. For example, our access control policy might be that nobody should be allowed in the office after 7 p.m. Maybe
Right.
that's an access control policy.
Right.
But a healthcare customer might ask us, like, when you are in the office, then you should always keep a log of where you went and came, just an addition to something that we already have. Or when you go out, you should sign a register before you go out, or you should have a thumbprint before you go out. But we might already be having something like just filling up a form or something. So the way of implementing a certain control might vary, but there won't be any major difference. There will be these minor things that we have to tweak our processes in order to venture into that domain.
Right. And does those changes that we need to make for adhering to the business philosophies or approaches of our customers mandate a change for across the board on our end as well? So, for example, there's one HIPAA compliant company which is HIPAA compliance. I get that, and they have a set of regulations which we need to adhere to in order to get the business. So, do we also learn and integrate the data protection requirements from those clients into the, let us say in this case, Zoho Corp's data compliance posture as well? Or is it just specific to a client?
So the way that we've taken the approach that we've taken, since we are on a global scale, the approach that we've taken is to incorporate those changes into our existing infrastructure instead of having to do it client specific, because sometimes that becomes unscalable.
Right.
Because every customer sort of different, and some of them are very strict, some of them are giving us leeway in certain things, so that would not scale. So the way that we've assumed the responsibilities from all of our clients is that our customers is that we incorporate that into the existing program itself. For example, like I mentioned, if a statement is about doing something in a certain way, but because of a certain customer, there's going to be a change. So there are certain evaluations that we do regarding the customer, like from where they are from and their market size and all of those other background checks that we do, a sort of a minimal one, so that we can think whether it is worth taking up that risk in order to bring about a change in our process. Because if it does, then there may be something that's conflicting with some other customer. So we have some thresholds for that. So once the threshold has been met, we bring it inside the main program itself instead of making it customer specific. But since our products are more adaptable and customizable, that way it's very easy for them. But in terms of these policies and procedures, we just incorporate it into the global ones already.
All right. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. So just continuing from where we left, which is to knowing our customers. While undergoing this phase, this is what we'll typically be coming up to, or this is where we'll land, which is we'd be knowing the market needs and the evaluation of our priorities. Where should we put more priority? For example, if we are having a lot of customers from certain domains, then it might be worth taking up that risk in order to venture into that space. But if there's just one customer who's asking us for a specific compliance, whether we want to do it or not, that's a business call. So we pretty much be knowing where we are heading to, what are the market needs, what do customers expect from us, and we can evaluate your priorities based on that. And we would also be concluding with a data inventory, which is what type of customer, since we know a certain customer is from this domain, we typically be knowing what type of data they'll be sharing with us in order for us to provide the service. If a banking customer or a customer in a banking domain is signing up for our service, then they typically be sharing bank related information, financial records, accounting records. So we typically be knowing what data would we be processing as part of that engagement. So we'd be concluding with a data inventory as well. So this is the advantage of going through this phase of knowing your customers. So the next, since we are already navigating through the compliance Cs, and I hope it's been interesting so far, we're finally moving into countries. That's more relevance to what we're discussing, because it's just, I'm just keeping the flow in such a way that we're just navigating through these seas, and we find ourselves at a shore soon. So just coming up to the point of countries, why are countries important, or why should you consider countries, and what do I mean by countries while setting up a program, is since we have offices and data centers in various geographies, since we operate locally, for example, Zoho operates in multiple countries, it's a multinational company, and we operate in the US, Europe, Australia, India, and so many other places. So since we have our office there, or since we have a potential base, or we either have a data center there, in such cases, we have to comply with the laws of the land. For example, the financial laws we'll have to comply, which is the tax related laws or something like that. So offices and data centers are something that would really influence your compliance program, because we have to comply with the law of that land that we're operating in. So that is one important consideration. And since there will be regional compliance requirements as also, and there will be local interpretations of the law. So just to clarify that point, or to give an example, is that GDPR is, though we call it as a general data protection regulation, though it's known like that, every country that is there in Europe would be having a local implementation of that. So they'll, for example, Germany having something called as BDSG, which is a local interpretation of the GDPR. The UK is having a UK DPA, which is a local interpretation of the GDPR. So it's very important that to know where our organization is placed globally, where our data is stored globally, so that we can comply with all of those specifics also. So that is the theme. So setting up a program that is global but also caters to the local requirements. So the second one is partners and vendors. This also has a lot of influence on your compliance program, because you might be using the help from your partners and vendors, for example, third-party contractors and sub-processors, in certain terms it's called, because you are not able to do certain things, or you want to offload some of your activities to them in order to keep your business running or to increase your business. So it's important to know where they are from, because, for example, you are operating from India, but you have a partner in Japan, then that partner might be generating leads or customers, or creating a business space in Japan, because of his Japanese customers would be signing up for our products, which in turn changes the way a compliance goes. So instead of just the list of offices and data centers, we are adding more countries onto the list of our compliances. So these are just setting our expectations, so that we'll know where we are headed to, what path is best for us. So partners and vendors, the location of where they are from, which part of the country they are from, which part of the world they are from, all of that is very important to be known while setting up the program. And final is extraterritoriality. Okay, I had a lot of trouble, dictating that word the first time I heard. And initially, I also thought it was supposedly aliens, but unfortunately not. I thought it was going to be interesting, but by extraterritoriality, extraterritoriality, it refers to the way that the law affects a particular country, even though the person is not from that country. Sometimes it gets complex. For example, you're having a website in the United States. You're not intending to sell your products to Europe, but you have just left it open in such a way that anybody from Europe or the UK or anywhere around the world can access your website and use your services. Then in that case, then it's really complex, that just because you're having a website, you have to comply with the law, because that person is accessing from Europe. You never intended to do that, to scope into that country. You did not intend to really market into that country, but just because some person just logged into your website, you have to comply with that law. That is a reality, because that is extraterritoriality. That's typically a word fund. Thank you for that. So yeah, since we've come to this end of the third slide, I know it sometimes gets a bit too much of information. I just want to highlight these certain points on the 3 C's that we've already seen. Just a quick summary. So the first C is to know about your company. The second is know about your particular customers, your customers, where they are from and all of that. And third is to know about the countries where your coverage is, where your particular offices and data centers and partners are located, and about the extraterritoriality. That's a very important consideration you should have while setting up a program. So out of this exercise, what you'd be learning is the applicable laws and regulations. So the applicable laws and regulations is because you are into different countries now, and you are having people visiting you from different countries, using your services from different countries. So in all such cases, it's very difficult for us to keep track of all of that. So through this exercise, you typically be able to know what are the laws and regulations that my company has to comply with because of my global operation. And you'd be having a location map. So the location map of our offices, our data centers, where our partners are physically located, where our vendors are located. So that gives us a lot of insight into the local jurisdictions there. And finally, the regulatory guidance and best practices. For example, like I mentioned, in Europe, every country has a regulator. Germany has a regulator, Netherlands has a regulator. All of these regulators give their own guidances and best practices for data protection, compliance, and all of that. So now that you know where you are physically, virtually, everywhere located because of this broad scale of operation, you'd be looking into these regulations and guidelines. You'd have a good list of all of that. So the next C is competition. I was really thinking if I should include this slide, but this is very, very important factor while considering a global program. I'm not going to go into very specifics of this, but it's going to help us to understand why competition is important, or to knowing your competition is important in setting up the program. So knowing your C, this is competition. So like this quote by Doug Warner says, in the world of customer service, it's important to remember that your competitor is only a click away. That's true, isn't it? You just go to Google, just type a particular product that you want to purchase. You just have so many listings from different companies who are providing the similar service. So you can just click a little bit away in order to go to your competitor. So it's very, very important to know these factors that I'm going to discuss next, so that you can set up a program to be that market differentiation factor that you have in your organization. So knowing your competition, the first one is coverage. This is to know which typical domains or which typical aspects your competitor is heading into. You would probably not be going into hacking into the database or doing something like that. It's just a Google search. You don't have to complicate that. Just Google search about that company. There are certain tools also that help us to understand certain aspects of their company, like what is their mission, what is their vision, what is their USP, and all of that. That gives us a good idea about where they are ventured into. The reason to know this coverage is because once you know this, when somebody, like we just saw in the quote, it is really clear that if somebody is going to a competitor's website, soon they'd be coming back to their website because the competitor is not having something, or because you have something better, or something of that sort. So it's very important to know where your competition is in, and what you are against, what you are fighting against, or what you are wanting to compete against, because that helps us to set up our program in order to proactively set up every rules, every standards, and every effort that we do. Because if they are complying for certain regulations, then it typically means that they are having customers from certain domains who might want to find an alternate sooner or later. So at that time, they might want to come to you. At that time, if you don't have that compliance or something, you would just lose out on a customer. So it's important to know their coverage. So the second one is compliance. So it's again just a Google search away. You can just search for example, AWS. Just go find out what their compliance are. All of those documents are mostly in public. Any company, Google's compliance, everything is there. Just online. You can just go see what are the n number of certifications they comply with, n number of laws that they comply with. So that again, just adding to the point of coverage, it just lets you know what are the things that you will have to comply with, or set up a program to comply. So the last one is +1. What is that one thing? Like we discussed, in knowing your company, which is your USP, your unique selling points. What is that one thing that you want to be different in order to gain your competition or gain your market in that particular aspect or the domain? So the USP is very important. So why not make compliance, or why not make privacy, or why not make security as that one factor that is differentiating you from your competition? So as part of this, what you'd be learning is you just be adding more points to your BIA, which is your business impact assessment. That was part of step 1 itself. I mean, knowing your company itself. During that step itself, BIA is one of the outcomes. You'd be just learning more or adding more insights to that. So know your connections. That is the next C. So there's a quick poll just to assess how many of us are still connected. So I request the moderator to put up that poll, please. This was just to assess how many of them are currently listening and how many of them just logged in and just left. So that I just get two options there. One is to know if you are really listening or partially, or we know what the third option should be. No, I'm not. So yeah, that's good answers. Thank you so much. So connections. Why should we know our connections? The first consideration, or our first connection, is our regulators. Since now we know which countries we are operating from, where our customers are from, or where we are going to set up a new office and all of that. Next step is to know the regulations there and the regulators there. It is because they heavily influence the way that our compliance program is being channeled, because they come up with new laws, they come up with new guidances. It's important to stay on top of all of that. Vendors, I'm just going to reiterate that point here, because third party management is very, very important. So we have to exactly know where our vendors are from, while onboarding and ongoing assessments of the vendors are very important. Because if you look at certain contracts with your customers, there will be this clause where it says you are liable for the acts, omissions, and all of that of your vendors. Basically, your company should take complete accountability of something wrong that your vendor did. So that's too much, but that's the reality. So it's very important to do the proper third party management program at your organization when you're setting up this program, and to scale it up that way. The next one is stakeholder. A stakeholder is typically anyone who's interested in your company. So these are people, right from your management to the auditors to analysts to media. Everybody else is a stakeholder to your organization, because the way that you are projecting yourself on the media will affect the way that you comply, or a negative publicity might affect the way that you comply with certain aspects of your programs. So that's very important to know who our stakeholders are. That those are our important connections. And as part of this exercise, we typically be learning a data protection impact assessment. So it's called as a DPIA. So we typically be knowing what data a vendor is processing, what are the different aspects of this processing, where should I put in more security, where should I put in more effort into privacy, and all of that. It will add on to our BIA, as well as to knowing the market needs as well. So these just improve our current understanding of our business, of the market needs, and it helps us to perform a DPIA. So the next one is, next C, is knowing the curves. Okay, that was a meme. We flattened the curve vertically. It's talking about the COVID times. Yeah, I'll let you know what I mean by curves. These are very, very, very important things. It's again related to the first point, which is to knowing your company, the business performance. So we flattened the curve vertically. The first point there is business pulse. I know like I said, I know I'll be repeating this phrase over and over again. So our compliance program should always be towards the business. It should always support the business. It should always help the business to grow. It should never put the business in a state where it's sucking up all of the resources, because of which we are not able to grow. So that's very, very, very important. So I'm just hitting it hard on the head there. An example that I would quote here again is, there's this certification called FedRAMP. That is a certification that an organization should gain if they want to go into the US government markets, if they want to have customers who are US government authorities. So just doing an audit for that will cost our company about $1.5 million. This is all public information. So, $1.5 million for just one compliance. So just imagine the cost involved. So during these times of COVID, it may not probably be worth doing such kind of an exercise. So it's important to know the business pulse. The second curve is the strength and weakness curve. So where is my organization good at, or in what are they good at, or where is our weakness, or where should we improve, where is that we are lacking, and all of those things is very, very important, because when you know this, when new compliances or when new projects for compliance comes in, you know where to focus more. We obviously want to focus more on the weaker areas, and we can keep our strengths or stronger points at a later level. So it's very important to know our weaknesses and our strengths. For example, in an organization, if access control is very strict, that's your strength. But if you don't have a proper way to fix code, or change management is not proper, or somebody, you just keep the lights on for a long time, because of which somebody from the outside can just constantly look inside. These are just environmental threats. So these are weaknesses that we might think is not really mattering, or does not matter too much, but it is very, very important to know our weaknesses that our company is having. Which policies are we weak in? And finally, the deviations and exceptions. I'd be covering this in the second part of my speech at a later time, but I'm just going to give a summary here. Is that deviations and exceptions from audits or from previous findings. So the different types of audits. For example, a customer might audit you, or a regulator might audit you, or you might do an internal audit. So deviation, basically the definition of a curve is a deviation from a straight line. So what are those things that you're deviating from? What are those things, n number of things that you're not up to the mark, is the deviation and exceptions. So it's important to know this, so that it's just adding to our list of strengths and weaknesses. And as part of this exercise, we'd be arriving at our SWOT analysis, which is to know our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, a risk assessment for every activity that we do, and it just adds more information, or adds more strength, or adds more visibility into our business impact assessment, or BIA. So this is what we learn from this phase. So the last phase, or the last C that we're going to see, is costs. So far we've been discussing about business. Now we are talking business. We must consult our means rather than our wishes, is what George Washington says. So it's about setting our priorities, knowing our costs, and all of that. So that's what we're going to discuss quickly. So the first one is budgets. So what is the budget that your organization is setting for compliance? Is it $1 million a year, or is it $100K a year? All of the budgets that is being allocated for your compliance projects is very, very important. Upskilling people, incident management, and all of those things, budget has a lot of relevance to that. So it's important to know the budgets that your organization is setting up for, or is providing for the compliance program. Second is resources. How many resources do we need? How many lab? It starts from not just people. It includes even the physical versions of it. For example, a laptop, or how many people, or what type of a configuration laptop is required for a person to do a particular job in this particular program. All of these are resources, not just people. So people are very, very important. I'll highlight that in the next point coming up. So the next consideration is fines. So I know this is a threat. Nobody wants to pay fines, right? If we cross a particular, that's if you cross a signal, you're going to pay a fine. You know that. If you're not going to comply with the law, if you don't pay your taxes, you're going to pay a fine. That is how it's there in compliance as well. If you do not comply with the data protection law or a standard, or if you're going to cross the mark of the requirements, then it's going to put you to a state where you have to pay a lot of fines. In GDPR, for example, it's about 20 million euros. 20 million euros is a great value, or even 4% of your company's last year's turnover. That's a huge value. So we have to be very, very careful about the fines. So the questions here, or the considerations here, is your organization ready to pay the fine for non-compliance? Obviously, the answer would be no. So what can we do about that? Something called cyber insurance that certain companies take, which helps you or give you a backing in case of a breach, in case of a fine. Your cyber insurance can help you pay off some of the costs. The last but not the. I just have two more points. So audits. Some of the audits, like I mentioned, the FedRAMP takes about $1.5 million. So that's going to cost you a lot of money. Same way, there are other audits. Every audit has a set of costs associated. Some regulations might require you to do an audit every 3 months. Some might require you to do an audit every 6 months or once in a year. So depending on that, there'll be a cost involved for the audit. So all of those should be considered while setting up your program. If just because you want to comply with something and you have the budget to do it, it's not a one-time exercise. That's what I want to constantly again remind ourselves, that compliance is not one-time program. You just do it and you just close the book and go away. It's not that way. It is being able to demonstrate your compliance, doing it all ongoingly, so that at any point of time you are compliant. So the last and important consideration is time. If you take audits, for example, the cost for an audit associated with a term called man hours. So how many men for how many hours? We would have probably learned that in our aptitude exams, like how long does it take for one man to perform an operation, and how long does it take for two people to do the same operation, and in what time, in how much amount of time. So it's typically, that's how even audits happen. For example, if you need the help of a legal attorney, then they cost you per hour. Could probably have about $100, $200 just for 1 hour, and all of that. So all of these have time constraints are very, very important. Your timelines are also important. With respect to costs, it's the time aspect where it's again payments to the people whom you're involving. So you should be very, very careful to know what are my budgets, what are the resources that I have and what I'll need, and taking up a cyber insurance, and for audits, how long it's going to take or how often I'm going to do. So we're actually coming to the end of this. So as part of this learning, you'd be doing a cost benefit analysis, resource estimation, and budget planning. So as part of this exercise, this is what you'll be taking away, which is a cost benefit analysis. Like, is it worth doing something at this point of time, and how much resources I need, and do I have the cost to help me to do it? So in summary, I'm just concluding here, is like we saw the learnings from each of these phases, each of these C's that we just traveled through. These are the summary points that I'm just recollecting as I'm concluding. The business impact analysis is something that you would come up with when you know your particular company and your customers and all of those. Data protection impact assessment, I'd be covering more of that in the second phase of it. Cost benefit analysis, market needs, priority evaluations, resource estimation and budget planning, SWOT analysis, activity, asset, data inventory classification, applicable laws, standards, and best practices. So these are all of those things that you go through, or you summarize with, or you'll end up with when you do this traveling through the 7 C's. So what is next? In the next portion of our talk, we'll be covering on how to operationalize the program, monitor and measure the program, improving the program, and I'll also give some more insights and learnings from what challenges we faced or is typically being faced by organizations with respect to compliance, and key factors that you can take into account to enhance the program. So there's this final poll before I move on to the Q&A. So I'd request the moderator to put through on screen the last poll, please. I'm just going to wait for 5 more seconds. Thank you for your responses. So just moving on to the Q&A session. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please. Yes, Shankar, please.
Well, Andrew, frankly, it was really a good session. I mean, as the polls results show, right? I mean, people loved it, and they learned something new, and they actually learned just about enough to keep liking what you have said, because anything more you would have said it would be too difficult to handle. But thanks a lot. With that, let me start off with the Q&A. Well, one gentleman has asked, I think it's a gentleman, but yeah, does GDPR compliance, can it be, I mean, automated? Can one automate GDPR compliance?
Um, I think that the person who was asked this has to stay on for the next session for that. But I'm just giving a preview of that now. Is
All right.
certain
All right.
yeah, certain aspects of it, yes, it can be it can be automated, but not everything can be, because it's about measuring, improving,
All
and all
right.
of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. We can.
Shankar.
Yes. Sorry, I lost my network here. But all right.
No
In
problem.
case you are done, ask one more question. How does SLA work in hybrid cloud setup?
In hybrid cloud setup, that's where the shared responsibility model comes in. So certain aspects is where your organization would take care. Since it's a hybrid model, it's between a public and a private environment. Certain aspects would be taken care by the service provider. Certain aspects would be taken care by the organization who's wanting to contract the service. So depending on how the contract is being put, certain parameters would be taken into account for setting up the SLAs. For example, availability. If the electricity for your service is going to be managed by the service provider, then that will be an SLA given by them. But if there's going to be an SLA about retention or cleanup of that information, and it's going to be taken care by your organization, then you would be having an SLA for that. So it's based on who's taking which responsibility, and it's more inscribed into contracts. The SLAs are inscribed into contracts.
Initially, you made a point about the company's culture. That was the first C slide that you had referred to. How important has culture been for you while you're working in Zoho for implementing your efforts?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I wanted to talk about that. So it's very important, because in our company, from what I've been through these last number of years, this culture has really helped us to grow organically in terms of compliance, because most of it had to be started off from scratch, or at least in the last 5 to 8 years is when our compliance program started to grow. And in the last 2 years, we are into this. I'll talk about that maturity program later on, but since everybody is involved in compliance, not I would never disqualify anybody as not being part of the program. Every employee has a part here, and since everyone has that inquisitiveness and that openness to listen from us, or to gain a knowledge from us, it has been easy for us to propagate our knowledge to them, and not have hard and fast rules, on strict rules on these are the things that you're supposed to do and not do. We usually go over a case by case basis, and certain things we already have defined processes, and that really helps us. So right from onboarding to our employees, to ongoing assessments of their knowledge and all of that, people are open to learn. That's what I've seen. So that is where the culture of Zoho stands out. They're open to learn. They don't just do it for the sake or as a ritual. They do it because they want to do it, or because they want to know. So that has been a real help for us to make this program really successful so far. So in terms of culture, yes, learning aspect is what really helped us in compliance to reach the skills that we are in today. I think, Shankar, are we connected? I think I'm asking you that question again. Are we still connected?
Yes, Andrew, I'm here. Andrew Balaji here.
Oh,
So,
okay, Balaj. Hi.
yeah, hello. The next question that we have is, does application banned by Indian government anyway related to GDPR?
I would not quote that to be true, because privacy aspect is one, but more of a security aspect, and there are these other political reasons. So it's very difficult to comment on that. But to some extent, the security was a focus point that they had mentioned. I saw the circular that they had mentioned. So that was one point, that these apps were not very secure, or not up to the standards. That was one reason. So that could be, yes.
All right. So the last question for the day that we have is from Keshav. For FedRAMP or HIPAA compliance, does it usually make sense to create separate workloads or deploy separate servers, since we are catering for specific industries by targeting these compliance programs? Or should we take measures to have a default offering and make it comply to HIPAA or FedRAMP?
That's a good question.
Mhm.
Yeah. So in that case, since that's where in product design or service design, there's something called as privacy by design and by default, or security by design and by default. So by default, there are certain things that we have to implement in our services, in our product offerings, so that it can be customized in addition according to the requirements of that law, instead of just having the default at a very low level. So if we by default offer good amount of privacy or good amount of security, then it's just going to be a little more change in configurations to make it even better. So the baseline of our offerings, the baseline of our services is very, very important. For example, for a FedRAMP, then they might ask us to create a local data center in a specific geography. That case is going to be a different story altogether. But for example, HIPAA, all the offerings that we already have the baseline for security and privacy. There are these minor configurations that customers may have to do in the products. For example, they'll have to encrypt an additional field. Right now, you might encrypt just personal information. So they might want to now encrypt health information. So we just have to help them support that, or they might want us to keep the logs for a longer period of time, maybe for a year or more than that. Right now, we might be having it for 6 months. So there are these minor changes that we'll have to incorporate. So the baseline of setting up the compliance, security, and privacy for our offerings and services is very important.